Afternoon, board members.
Good afternoon.
Everybody's doing well. I have 3:59. I'm going to wait just a couple of more minutes to make sure that everybody has the opportunity to join us, but it looks like we've got a full turnout. Once I do call the meeting to order, I'll call the roll. So if you will unmute your button long enough to announce your presence, I would appreciate it.
Hey there, Martha Zoller here, and I'm going to mute.
Okay. All right. I'll call. So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Stan DeJarnin. It's my privilege to chair the State Board of Education. And I call this meeting, this special called meeting of the State Board of Education to order at this time. I will start, since we're all meeting virtually today, I want those who are joining us virtually online to know what board members are present for today's meeting. So if you'll announce your presence when I call your name. Mr. Nick Ellis. Mr. Ellis, present? All right, we'll come back. Frank Griffin.
I am present.
Helen Rice.
I am present.
Thank you. Ms. Kennemore.
I know she's probably
We'll come back to Ms.
on.
Kennemore. Kenneth Mason. Please remember to unmute your mic before you say here. Mr. Mason? All right. Leonte Benton.
Present.
Thank you. Mr. Valadares. Mr. Valadares. All right, Mr. Downing.
Here.
Thank you. Ms. Zoller.
Present.
I'm here representing District 10. Mr. Sweeney.
Here.
Mr. Donaldson. I don't believe he's able to join us today, but just in case, I wanted to make sure I called his name. Ms. Fennell.
Present.
Ms. Petty.
Present.
Ms. Witcher, our State Teacher of the Year.
I am here.
Glad to have you with us, Ms. Witcher. Let me go back one more time. Mr. Ellis, are you with us?
I'm present now. Sorry for the delay.
Not a problem. Ms. Kennemore, are you present?
Yes, I am present.
Thank you. Mr. Mason. All right. All right. Mr. Valadares. All right. We do have a quorum. I have recorded 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 of our 14 board members are able to join us. Our 14 voting board members, and also we have 12 counting Ms. Witcher. So we do have a quorum. So at this time, I will call for a motion to approve today's agenda.
So moved, Frank.
Thank you, Mr. Griffin.
Second.
Second by Sweeney. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? All right. All right. The agenda has been approved. So with that in mind, we will proceed to the first item on today's agenda, and I will turn this over to Superintendent Woods and his staff.
Chairman Sweeney, or Chairman DeJarnett, I apologize. We have Allison Timberlake on the meeting to walk through this recommendation for the board.
All right, and it is the mathematics achievement standards, correct?
That is correct.
All right. Dr. Timberlake, glad to have you with us. Would you walk us through this process, please, and the results that you're recommending?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and board members. Good afternoon. It's my pleasure to walk you through the recommendation before you today. This past school year was the first year of implementation of new mathematics assessments aligned with Georgia's new K-12 mathematics standards, which were approved by the state board in 2021. The last step of the test development process is setting achievement standards or CUT scores through a process called standard setting. These CUT scores are used to designate student performance on Georgia milestones as beginning learner, developing learner, proficient learner, or distinguished learner. And given that there are 4 achievement levels, that necessitates we have 3 CUT scores. Approximately 60 Georgia mathematics educators participated in a 4-day standard setting meeting to recommend these CUT scores. As a result of that process, educators validated the existing CUT scores for the developing learner and proficient learner levels for continued use. That means that their recommendations were consistent with the existing CUT scores at these 2 levels. By maintaining the existing CUT scores for developing and proficient learner, we will have comparability to previous years, and approving today's recommendation would not change our proficiency rates. The recommendation before you today is to adopt the educator's recommended CUT scores for the distinguished learner level, which does represent a more meaningful change from the existing CUT scores. The educators that participated in standard setting felt strongly that the newly recommended CUT scores are a better reflection of the level of achievement necessary to demonstrate the knowledge and skills required at the distinguished learner level in alignment with the new content standards. So the recommended CUT scores for distinguished learner are presented to the state board today for adoption, and I believe you have access to those CUT scores through the materials. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Timberlake. I'll now entertain questions from members of the board. And if, let's just do this quickly. Mr. Ellis, do you have any questions for Dr. Timberlake?
No, sir.
Mr. Griffin?
Point of order, Stan. I
Yes.
think before we start entertaining questions, I think you have to entertain a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Sweeney. I got a little ahead of myself. I'll entertain a motion to approve the mathematics achievement indicators
So moved.
standards. We have a motion by Sweeney. Who was the second? Second by Zoller. Thank you. Now, does anyone have questions? Mr. Ellis, any questions?
No, sir.
Mr. Griffin? Ms. Rice?
Yes, I've got some questions. Allison, can you just briefly tell me about the time frame for that process, and when do we start working on this? And I know I've read through this, and it looks like that there were several processes, items and things that we dealt with, things that are a bookmark process, and then using a bookmark within the score OIB, which were the ordered item booklet. And then I think we had some things from the bookmark standard setting procedure. We went to that, and then you used the OIB, that ordered item. So tell me a little about the difference in the bookmark setting. I think I understood it, but those were testing contents and population. You looked at the testing content and the population of students through that, and then that achievement levels, descriptors, that did one thing, and then the OIB pulled it all together in a booklet of items. Explain that a little bit better to me, please.
Yes, ma'am, I'd be happy to. So the standard setting meeting itself took place over 4 days. We utilized a well-established process called the Bookmark Standard Setting Procedure, which was reviewed and approved by our Assessment Technical Advisory Committee. This procedure relies on the professional judgment of educators who are familiar with both the tested content and the population of students taking the assessment, which are our Georgia educators. So our educators in this process first studied the achievement level descriptors, and these descriptors summarize the knowledge, skills, and understandings expected of students in each of those 4 achievement levels. They then considered the content-based expectations of students, and then they used what we call an ordered item booklet, or an OIB, of test questions. And in that booklet, we order the test questions in terms of difficulty. So the participants then used those descriptions of the knowledge and skills students need to have at each level and the ordered item booklet of test questions. And they then recommended cut scores by identifying the questions that measure the knowledge and skills of which students in a given achievement level are expected to have mastery. So essentially, the bookmark procedure allows Georgia educators to recommend cut scores that link the test questions, the content-based expectations for students, and the state content standards.
Okay, were the people that were on those committees, did some of them do the standard setting for us?
So we have,
Any of, on that
sorry,
committee?
I'm sorry, could you clarify the question?
The group of teachers and professionals that were on there, the participants that were helping to do the cut score, were they, any of them, did they help with our standards making, when we did review the standards before, or was it a completely different group of people?
I believe that throughout the entire test development process, we did invite teachers who were part of the content standards development work, so they could bring that expertise throughout the test development process.
Okay, and within those 4 days, y'all looked at items, and then you looked at responses, selected responses, and instructive responses, and is that the way the 4 days worked, where people were looking at those different things to see difficulty of the test and things that needed to easiest to hardest? I think I saw in there at one point. Is that sort of what the 4 days were involved with?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And was that just done in the last 2 weeks, or was that, when was that done?
It was, I need to check my calendar, but I believe it was 2 weeks ago.
Okay. All right. And so what we have seen is a lot of the distinguished ones, the previous scores, some of them only went down like 4 points. I guess my biggest ask here is on grade A, which is just 8th grade math, that recommended cut score is what, just 8 points difference. But on the algebra concepts and connections, that algebra 1, for grade 8, that is actually that 9th grade course, right, of algebra, but we offer it to our advanced 8th graders. Is that
Some
correct?
advanced, yeah, so that's our end of course assessment for algebra concepts and connections, which, like you said, is typically a 9th grade course, but it could be taught in 10th grade, and similarly, you can have advanced 8th grade students who are participating in it, and all of their data would have been together in the standard setting process.
Okay, so can you tell me what led to this number being like almost 14 points difference from what we had before? And I know this algebra had more rigor in it, because we were there when they were putting those things together. But give me an idea of just why it has dropped back to 14 points less.
Certainly. Yeah, like you said, there's definitely more rigor in the standards. However, in grade 8 in algebra, there was a more significant change in terms of the content, in terms of geometric reasoning. In the new grade 8 standards, there's a greater focus on linear functions, while geometric reasoning has been moved to another course. And similarly, in algebra, there's a greater focus on functional reasoning with the removal of the geometric reasoning standards. And because of that, it's not unexpected that there was a greater change in these 2 courses as the educators aligned the content of the assessments, the ALDs, and the new standards to recommend these updated cut scores.
So that grade 8, which was just that the math course that we had, but did it have that little pre-algebra in it? Is that what you're saying, it had got to be more linear?
That is my understanding from what my curriculum colleagues and the educators described to us when they recommended these cut scores.
Okay, and so concepts and connections is more of a reading, a more abstract, not abstract, but more deep, more rigor and more involved in technical understanding?
So there's a greater focus on functional reasoning. The portion of the
reasoning,
course
that's what I
for
was trying to say.
geometry, yeah, was removed. And that tended to be at the higher end of this scale. So it doesn't surprise me that distinguished learner is where we saw some changes with the cut scores, because that's where the greater change to the content occurred.
So what percentage of our students had been performing before at that distinguished learning, that in 8th grade, that 579? Do we know that?
Let me pull it up. Give me just a minute.
Dan, I'm just trying to get a grasp on this, because when we make this decision on this, you know, it's gonna be there for a long time.
Aware of that.
Ms. Wright, it's going to take me just a minute to find that data. My apologies.
That's okay. Allison, I know you got it.
Sorry, you hit me, and now I'm trying to find it. If you have any other questions, I'm happy to take those, and I'm going to have one of my staff members pull that while we keep talking.
All right, go back, and let's do the same thing on the concepts and connections. What percentage of those, our students were at 594, okay? And we can go on to another thing and come back to that. If anybody else has any questions.
Well, I'll just continue to go through the roster here. Ms. Kennemore, do you have any questions?
Yes, good afternoon. I was wondering, with the list of stakeholders, teachers and all that were involved in setting the cut scores, was GOSA or anybody from representative from GOSA present with this group on the list?
I can answer that. We did share this recommendation with the governor's office, Ms. Kennemore, and there were no concerns with the governor's office with the recommendation.
What about the governor's office of student achievement in particular? I know sharing with the governor's office is one thing, but I was just wondering about that particular office. I know it's up under the governor, but I was just wondering if they were a part of the conversation.
Yeah, GOSA participates in our technical advisory committee, so they were part of the process when we set the process and the expectations for how we would conduct the standard setting.
Okay. Also, I was just concerned about the drop in the cut scores. Is that going to affect the rigor of the courses with the drop? You know, some of them are just a few points, but with the one particular cut score, 14, I think 14 points or something like that. It just, I just want to make sure that that's not going to affect the rigor of the course for our students.
I do not believe there's any reason that this would affect the rigor of the course. As I mentioned, the cut scores for both developing and proficient remain unchanged, so our proficiency rate's unchanged. This is just an adjustment to the cut for students to get in that highest level at distinguished learner.
Okay.
But if we had a pretty good percentage of them passing at 579, and in 8th grade, and then in that connections, if we had a pretty good percentage at 594, what would precipitate it dropping that much if they were? Because you're saying they've reached that point, so you don't have to. That's sort of how they get to a cut score, wasn't it? At the very end, when they were setting the cut score. Is that a fair assessment?
So I do want to clarify, there's still a range of achievement at that distinguished learner level. So this cut score that we're considering is just you can kind of think of it as that door to get into that level. But there's still a lot of instruction and learning that can occur to get to, for lack of a better phrase, a perfect score. There's still an entire range for distinguished learner level. And so through that process, they were working through the content of the test and aligning the content to the achievement level descriptors, which are based on the content standards. And they identified that spot where a just distinguished student would be successful. So that's where they would then place that cut score for distinguished learner. And just to close that out, it's a very content-driven process where the educators are really focused on looking at the content of the test, the content of the ALDs, and the content of the state standards to align those expectations. And Ms. Rice, to come back to your, sorry, Ms. Rice, to answer your earlier question, in 2023, with our previous algebra test, we had 10.4% of students at the distinguished learner level.
At the 579.
Sorry, I gotta check the cut score at, I believe it's 594 was our cut score for algebra.
10%.
Yes, 10.4%. And in grade 8, it was 11.9% at that level.
But that's where we really want our scores to be higher. We want developing and proficient to be, not beginning and developing, but proficient and distinguished should be the 40% or 50%. So if we adjust these cut scores, are we thinking we're going to have a wider range for kids to be able to make a higher score?
Yes, that range would be there. And even with these cut scores, the scale itself goes up into the 700s, depending on the grade level. There's still additional questions and opportunities for students to score at an even higher level. And across the board, we want all students to move from one level to the next, from beginning to developing to proficient to distinguished, and those ranges will still exist as well as the opportunity for improvement.
But Allison, if we don't have the bar adjusted right, and the opportunity, we just don't want to be okay. We want to be have accountability there that's really solid. So a 10% is not where I would have wanted distinguished learners to be in that area, and I'm struggling with that, but I know some other people have some other questions. But you're saying that you think, so if these are lowered, if these cut scores are lowered, then you think we're going to have a broader, so do we have any idea of what estimation that would be of students that would be maybe in the distinguished and proficient level?
I don't have those numbers. This change would only move some students from the proficient learner level to the distinguished learner level. So there would be no change in the overall proficiency rates. We would just have a change in that, depending on the grade, because in one grade the cut score actually increases, but those students who were near the existing distinguished learner cuts could move from proficient to distinguished or vice versa in adopting these updated distinguished cut scores.
And that's going to be a true picture of where we are as a state when we do that. That's going to be
so the educators who participated in standard setting, based on the content of the new state content standards and the assessment, felt strongly that this is the appropriate place for the distinguished cut scores, and that these adjustments need to be made to make sure that the new assessments align with the new standards and have the appropriate cut scores for what it takes to be a distinguished learner.
Okay. Well,
All
next
right.
time I hope to.
Go ahead.
I'm fine.
I'm sorry. Do you have
No,
another question,
no,
Ms. Rice?
No, I'm fine.
Okay. All right, Mr. Bent, do you have a question?
No.
Mr. Downey?
No.
Ms. Zoller?
No.
Mr. Sweeney?
I just have a quick question. Allison, how frequently does the department, and I'm just kind of sharing this as general knowledge for everyone, how frequently does the department review these cut scores?
Cut scores get reviewed anytime there's a significant change with the assessment, as in this case, there were new content standards. Otherwise, we maintain our scales and our cut scores to have comparability from year to year. So for Georgia milestones for math, the last time we set cut scores was in 2015 when we first launched Georgia milestones.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Fennell,
No questions.
Ms. Petty,
No, sir, no questions.
Ms. Witcher.
No questions.
All right. All right, everybody's had a chance to ask their questions. We have a motion on the table to approve the math achievement standards as presented. I'll entertain a motion to approve the math standards as, we've already got a motion. I'm sorry, we already have a motion and a second. I'm gonna call a roll call, so you can vote, individually on this. In favor of approving the math achievement standards, Mr. Ellis, how do you vote?
Yes.
Mr. Griffin?
Yes.
Ms. Rice?
Come back to me.
Ms. Kennemore? Mr. Benton?
No.
Mr. Downing?
Yes.
Ms. Zoller?
Yes,
I vote yes. Mr. Sweeney?
Yes.
Ms. Fennell?
Yes.
Ms. Petty?
yes,
Ms. Witcher, you're a non-voting member. Ms. Rice, how do you vote?
I'm gonna abstain.
Ms. Kennemore, how do you vote?
no,
All right.
Mr. Chair, this is Rick Valadares. I just want you to know I'm here as well.
Mr. Valadares, have you heard the conversation? Are you ready to cast a vote?
Yes,
How do you vote, Mr. Valadares?
yes.
All right. There are 2 noes, 1 abstention, and the rest are yeses, so the motion passes. Let's move on to item number 2, RISA Literacy Grant.
We have Matt Cardoza. I think the two Matts interrupt each other. We have Matt Cardoza to present that item, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Cardoza?
Good afternoon. Can y'all hear me okay?
I can hear you just
Yes.
fine.
Okay. Yes, we recommend that the State Board of Education approve the I'm sorry, I'm pulling up this item exactly in front of me here. It's recommended that the State Board of Education authorize the state school superintendent to award a grant to RISAs at a cost not to exceed $6,111,300 in state funds for RISA and other statewide literacy efforts, as approved by the Georgia Literacy Council in June.
All right. I'll entertain a motion to approve the literacy grant.
I so moved.
Ms. Rice, thank you for the motion. I'll have a second.
Mr. Kennemore,
Ms. Kennemore, you're seconding the motion. Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Cardoza?
I have just a quick question. I know that this is a formulaic grant, and was the distribution to the RISAs done by FT, or was there like an academic element with regard to the distribution of the grant funds?
Mr. Sweeney, so the distribution, of course, for the requirement was 1 coach per RISA. So once that was that amount was taken away from the $6 million. It then started to look at like number of schools, number of the K-3 schools in particular. So it became somewhat formulaic that way.
Okay.
Any other
I just
questions
like-
for I'm sorry, any other questions?
I've got a comment. Based on the meeting today that we had the privilege of going and met with, Cordosa was there too. I think the funding sounds pretty solid from what we heard. Wouldn't you say, Matt?
Yes, absolutely. The RESA directors have presented a plan, broken out the amount of money, like I just mentioned, beyond the one coach. And so with the Literacy Council approving that, as it, of course, was mentioned in the governor's budget that was signed, that DOE just had to make sure that the route they were going was in step with the way the Literacy Council did. And since they approved that, it certainly seems to make sense and a good rollout.
Yes.
Any other questions or comments from members of the board? All right, I'll call the roll. Mr. Ellis, how do you vote on this literacy grant?
I'll support it, yes.
Mr. Griffin,
Yes.
Ms. Rice,
Yes.
Ms. Kennemore,
Yes.
Mr. Benton,
Yes.
Mr. Valadares,
Yes.
Mr. Downing,
Yes.
Ms. Zoller.
Yes.
I vote yes. Mr. Sweeney,
Yes.
Ms. Fennell,
Yes.
Ms. Petty.
Yes.
All right, the vote to approve the literacy grant is unanimous. Thank you, folks. Now let's move on to item number 3.
Yeah, this is a 50 to 250 contract with HVAC Allies for $77,488 to install a new dual compressor and related wiring and piping for a walk-in freezer and cooler at the Atlanta Area School for the Deaf.
All right, I'll entertain a motion to approve this agenda item.
So moved.
Absolutely. Or
Would you identify yourself, please?
Lisa Kennemore.
Ms. Kennemore, thank you.
I'll
Who
second.
seconds?
I'll second.
All right, thank you, Mr. Downing. Any questions for Rusk about this?
Is there a timeline for installation? I know AASD has needed this for such a long period of time. DeKalb County has been gracious to help them out with their refrigerated and freezer items.
I do know there's a rush on the contract, but Lou, are you here?
Yes, I am. They'll start, it'll take 2 weeks to install it, so it'll be installed, it won't be finished until the end of the first week of school. We're doing an emergency, we're working with Amanda to get an emergency PO through to have a temporary trailer that includes a cooler and a freezer on it from US Foods. And that'll be where the food will come that is ordered and arrives prior to start of school. So we'll be fine, even though the whole job won't be done until the end of that first week of school at the latest.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. I know it's been a long time coming. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments from members of the board? All right, we have a motion on the table. If you'll get ready to vote, I'm going to try to go through the roster as quickly as possible. Mr. Ellis,
Yes.
Mr. Griffin,
Yes.
Ms. Rice,
Yes.
Ms. Kennemore,
Yes.
Mr. Benton,
Yes.
Mr. Valadares,
Yes.
Mr. Downing,
Yes.
Ms. Zoller.
Yes.
I vote yes. Mr. Sweeney,
Yes.
Ms. Fennell,
Yes.
Ms. Petty.
Yes.
All right, the vote is unanimous and the motion carries. Next item.
This is a grant amendment for the character education programming that was awarded. I believe it was awarded in 2 rounds, one at the May 2024 board meeting and one at the June 2024 meeting. We had several districts that had made the choice not to participate, which allowed us to increase some of the funds at some of the schools that weren't getting funded in the other districts, which is why we're bringing it back. So the original grant amount was $5,023,295, and the amended grant amount is $5,011,677. Thank you.
All right, I'll entertain a motion to approve this agenda item.
So moved.
Mr. Downey,
Second.
and a second by Ms. Rice, I believe. Any questions or comments?
It's a great program.
Yes, it
Most
is.
definitely. Thank you,
No.
Jason, for bringing it to the board.
Yeah.
Any other questions or comments? All right, get prepared to vote, please. We'll start again. Mr. Ellis, how do you vote?
Yes.
Mr. Griffin,
Yes.
Rice,
Yes.
Kennemore,
Yes.
Benton,
Yes.
Valladaris,
Yes.
Downey,
Yes.
Zoller.
Yes.
DeJarnett votes yes. Sweeney,
Yes.
Fennel,
Yes.
and Petty.
Yes.
All right, the motion carries unanimously. Our last agenda item is the taking action to approve a committee to study an accreditation rule. I'm going to turn this over to Ms. Petty, and she can give me the names of the committee members.
Thank you, Chairman DeJarnett. I am in a very bad rainstorm right now, so I hope everyone can hear me. We are late doing this, and we're working hard to get this done. We're going to be working with SREB, and just because of their prior knowledge, I would like to select Nick Ellis, Frank Griffin, Jason Downey, and Scott Sweeney.
And are you going to serve on this committee as the chair?
Yes, sir, I will.
All right. So we have 5 members recommended to serve on this accreditation committee and work with SREB to bring us a recommendation for a rule on accreditation. I'll entertain a motion to approve the names that were submitted for this accreditation committee.
So
So
moved.
moved, Martha Zoller.
Ms. Zoller,
I'll
thank you for the
second it.
motion. I'm sorry,
I'll
who?
second.
Ms. Rice,
Kelly.
thank you for the second. Any discussion or questions?
Dan, I thought we'd already appointed them.
Well, we didn't
Well,
take
you brought it
official,
up.
they've been doing
Oh,
some work,
okay.
but we haven't we haven't taken official action on it, but they've been getting started. So,
Okay.
all right, but thank you. All
Well,
right,
we
any
I
other
still support
questions?
it.
Any other questions? All right, get ready to vote. All in favor of the committee list as presented, Mr. Ellis, how do you vote?
Yeah. Yes.
Mr. Griffin?
I reckon.
Rice?
Yes.
Kennemore?
I abstain.
All right, Mr. Benton?
Yes.
Valladaris?
Yes.
Downing?
Yes.
Zoller?
Yes.
DeJarnett votes yes. Sweeney?
Yes.
Fennel?
Yes.
And Petty?
Yes.
All right. We have, I think we have 11 yeses and 1 abstention, so the motion carries. There being no further business on the agenda, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
So moved.
Who was the motion by? I'm sorry.
Downey and Sweeney.
Downey and Sweeney, all right? All in favor,
I got it.
say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right.
Opposed.
We are adjourned. Thank you very much for your time today, board members. and I hope you have a great rest of your week. Thank you very much. And thank you, DOE staff, for joining us.
Thank you.